Was that our Drew or some famous singer? Isn't that a great invitation for Christmas Eve? So that's just our teaser. There's actually a whole second verse, and she goes crazy in the next verse. So you're going to want to see the rest of it, as crazy as Drew gets. I know she thinks that's incredibly cringeworthy, so make sure you go tell her how beautiful she sounds and looks, because she doesn't believe it, but it was great. So tomorrow on Facebook, we're going to be sharing the full version, both verses, and we want you to A, go watch it, but B, we want you to share it. So if you do not follow us on social media, make sure that you look up here, pull your phones out if you need to, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. You'll see the video tomorrow, share it to your page, email a link to it to your family and your friends, play it inconspicuously at your desk every time someone walks by. Be real obnoxious about it, but use it as an opportunity to spark a conversation and to invite people to Christmas Eve. Along those same lines, you'll all find postcards on your seats today. Those are your invitation to hand out, and there's a ton more on the connection counter out in the lobby, so grab as many as you want. If we need to make more, we will, but we want you to invite this Christmas Eve. So on December 24th, we will be having 2 Christmas services as usual, 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. It's the same service, so pick one, whichever works best for what you've got going on that day. And we hope that you'll join us and bring some people along. While I'm working through the next announcements, go ahead and pull out a Connect card in the seat back in front of you. We like for everybody to fill those out. It gives us an opportunity to know who's here, and if you have any prayer requests or any questions, you can write that on the card, and we will collect those in a little bit, so go ahead and do that. Next week, we have a really fun Sunday because it's our kids' Christmas performance, and our kids have been working hard. I know mine have been working hard at home this week. My daughter's playing a prosecutor, which is great because she needs more practice in how to learn how to argue with her parents. So that's going to be a great show next week. So we hope you'll be here. It'll be during the 10 a.m. service. It's a part of service. It's short, but invite grandparents, invite friends. Everybody loves to see the little kids up on stage. So that's next week. And then we still have Angel Tree happening out in the lobby. So when you leave today, you can grab a tag. And those gifts all benefit Camp for Change, which, as you know, we have a deep partnership here at BBCC with. And so go ahead and pick those up, buy those gifts, and you will return them all on by December 22nd, I should say. And then finally today, if you are new at all to BBCC, we have what we call a welcome party every few months, and we have one today at 3:30. It happens at Acreage in Lafayette, up on the hill there. It's a beautiful location. It's a really informal time for you to come and meet some of our pastors, some of our staff. We'll buy you a drink, we'll get you some appetizers. Some of our families from BBCC have crashed in the past, so you may get to meet some other people. Pamela, you're welcome to crash again. I heard it went great. So you might be able to meet some of the families that are in our church, and it's just an opportunity for you to get to know people, and kind of a first step for you to take to find out more about what opportunities you have to connect here at BBCC and get involved and ask any questions that you might have.
As a church, we're seeking to prepare the way these few weeks and leading up to Christmas, prepare the way to celebrate the birth of our Savior, right? The birth of Jesus, and not just go through like the Christmas crazy, but actually push in and be present. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of Bible trivia. This is not rhetorical. I'm not talking to myself here. Because this story gets a little bit confusing, and there's a lot of myth around it, and then what Scripture says and what's myth. So I have a couple questions. How many wise men showed up on the night of Jesus' birth? You got 62. We have the right answer. All right, we know this one for sure. The answer? 0. The wise men did not show up. They were not at the manger scene. They were not there the night Jesus was born. So, trick question. Sorry, I misled you. Tricky pastors. Yeah, you guys are there. All right, how many wise men were there? 3? Maybe. We don't know. Yes, that is the right answer. I don't know. We don't know. We have no clue. There could have been 62. There could have been 3. We don't know. We straight up don't know. What did they came and they were riding on what? We don't know. We don't know. We see camels in our head, but the Bible never says, and they came on camels. We made that up. What were they wearing? We don't know. What's wrong with you guys? You watch too many. Yes. What were their names? Like the tradition even has, we could go to, there is a church somewhere in Europe and you can go and see their skulls. We don't know. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go to the scriptures. And we're going to see what we know from that actual verse and from those scriptures. And so it is Matthew chapter 2. So you can turn there if you have a Bible. I'm going to put the scriptures on the screen and we are going to walk through this passage in the story of the wise men or the Magi. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi, and I'm going to use the word, some of your versions say wise men, some say Magi, some, I don't know what yours says, but we're going with Magi. It's the most literal. From the east came to Jerusalem, and they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." Okay, we're going to go through like the nouns in this. We're going to go through the main subjects that this scripture is talking about. First off, Bethlehem. Where is Bethlehem? Raise your hand if you have been to Bethlehem. Some of us, many of us, yes. Bethlehem, some of us have been there. Is it close to Jerusalem? Yes, very. It's 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Bethlehem, if the word actually means house of bread, which is awesome because Jesus often says, right, I am the bread of life. Or just a couple minutes ago, we commemorated and recognized and sat in the truth of Jesus by eating unleavened bread. House of bread. This Bethlehem is the place where David, King David, the second king of Israel, where he was born. And it's a promise, one of the Old Testament promises is saying that from the seed of David, from the seed of Jesse, this line of Jesse, which David is his son, that God is going to provide a Messiah and that he will be born in Bethlehem. So Bethlehem is a real place. It's a small place 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. We're going to talk about King Herod here for a minute. King Herod was born in southern Palestine. He was friends with some people you maybe have heard of before. Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, real people. Okay, King Herod was connected and knew them. Through his father, King Herod had Roman citizenship. So he was born in Palestine. He was half Jewish, part Jewish, and worshipped in some of the Jewish ways, but he was also a Roman citizen. At the age of 36, he conquered and began to rule Jerusalem, and he became the Roman king over that whole province at the age of 36. What he was probably most known for, and what you can still see, he was an incredible builder. He built incredible cities, aqueducts. Many of us that have been to the Holy Lands have seen that still the ruins of what Herod built in his years, 37 years that he ruled. He was also an incredible politician and went through many changes in Rome, but he kept his seat of power over the Judean people. He was a great politician with much favor from Rome. Okay? The crown of his building, and the crown of what he had built. He built Masada. You know, those of us who have been to Masada. Caesarea Maritime. Many of us have stayed on the hills, on the side of the Mediterranean in that place. But the crown of what he built was actually the temple. He rebuilt the Jewish temple. Because we know that Solomon's temple, quick Bible history, Solomon's temple was built and then it was destroyed by the Babylonians in 587. They were then the God's people, many were killed and some were taken to exile. 70 years later they came back and Nehemiah, we read about in the Old Testament, rebuilds the temple. But it's a much smaller temple even than Solomon's. Well, Herod the Great comes in. He says, I will make an incredible temple. And so he refashions and rebuilds. He moves all this dirt and builds the Jewish temple to this incredible ornate thing. So many of us remember in the New Testament when Jesus is at the temple and he says, destroy this place and in 3 days I'll rebuild it. And everyone freaks out because they have just rebuilt the temple. It's taken years and years and years to do, and it's immaculate and ornate. Of course, Jesus is speaking of himself, but they don't get it. Herod rebuilds the temple. As he grew older, he grew sick and demented. Now, this is probably, he actually grew sick and physically sick and dementia, but also the power and everything that came around him and what it took to stay king. He killed his wife. He had like 6 or 7 wives. He killed one of his wives and 2 of his sons. He killed his firstborn son. He became so concerned with his power and keeping power. He became a mad king, and this was the climate into which Jesus was born. We're not going to read about it today, but what Herod does here after this story about the wise men, what Herod does is he says, I want all the kids 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem to be slaughtered. Kill them. And which they were then killed under Herod's orders. And Jesus had to flee. Interesting side note. Jesus was a refugee because of genocide. You hear that? That was his experience in the world into which he entered. Okay, the Magi, the wise men. Who were they? We don't know. Honestly, we don't completely know. There's a number of conjectures. One is that there was an ancient caste of priests from the Medes, the people group of the Medes. It's a people group in northern Iran. In Daniel, we read about these people. Remember Daniel and King Nebuchadnezzar, and he has a dream. In Daniel 2:2, it says, so the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. These were the Magi, these priestly order of people back in Daniel who come and they could interpret dreams and tell the stars. Very likely that it could have been this old priestly group of people. Or Magi could have just mean those who are focused on dreams, astrology, magic, future telling. They likely came from Babylon or Persia. And you got to remember, in that exile, when the Jews got taken over to Babylon, still many Jews remained there. So it's a good chance that even if these wise men and these Magi, they would have learned about the Old Testament. They would have learned about a coming Messiah. It makes sense that they could have learned there and then seen this star and said, okay, we want to come and follow. We want to come and see. One thing's very certain. They were not Jews. They were not Jewish. They were Gentiles. And they came to pay homage, which was actually a normal practice. When a king was born, you'd bring a gift and pay homage to recognize the new king and the new ruler coming in. Were they Jews? Okay, but they give him the title, King of the Jews. King of the Jews. This is a title first given in the book of Matthew. The title first given in the book of Matthew, and it's finally given. We're in Matthew chapter 2 here. Matthew chapter 27, verse 37. Above his head, they place the written charge against him. Jesus is on the cross, and they nail it up, put it over his head. This is Jesus, King of the Jews. And they mock him. King of the Jews. Jesus immediately when he's born, Herod's coming after him with this title. He will end up on the cross with this plastered over his head. Okay, there's a star. There's a star. This is all just in these first 2 verses, right? This star. What was the star? We don't know. There's many people, actually, we've been able to go back and look that there's a planetary alignment between Jupiter and Saturn at this time. They say, maybe this was a star. Maybe they came together and were so bright that this was it. Maybe. Others believe it was a supernova. Others believe, no, it was a comet. There was a comet coming through at that time, and that's what the star was. We don't know. What we do know is a supernatural work of God was at play in the celestial, in the heavens, and drew these Magi to Jerusalem. Verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Why was King Herod disturbed? He was going mad. I mean, he is right. Herod is going to live for somewhere between 2 and 4 more years after Jesus is born. He is in the peak of his crazy. Herod is disturbed. He says, wait, someone else is going to be king? Someone else comes with the title king? And then why is Jerusalem disturbed? Because Herod's crazy. They're afraid of Herod. And what is he going to do? He could do something crazy like kill all kids 2 years and younger. Okay? When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. So Herod says, okay, I'm going to call all these religious leaders together, the chief priests and the teachers of the law. Who are these people? They're the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the scribes. The Pharisees and the Sadducees are kind of these two main sects of Jewish belief in the Jewish system. Think Protestant and Catholic, if you will, even within the history of Christian church history. And he brings them together. The scribes actually write out the Old Testament scriptures, but even more so, they act as lawyers. Because in Jerusalem at this time, they're saying, we want to live by God's laws and God's ways. And the scribes say, well, we'll tell you how to do that. Herod brings them all together, and he says, hey, when is the Messiah to be born? And see, we hear about the Pharisees and the Sadducees often in the life of Jesus. They're the religious ones who should have been the most excited about the birth of the Messiah, but instead, they will end up leading the charge to kill him. Those who should have seen it most obviously missed it most completely. Freaks me out a little bit. In Bethlehem, in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. And then they quote, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. They answer right. They answer very intelligently. They answer theologically. They know the Bible. They give the right answer. They quote Micah chapter 5, verse 2. We know where he'll be born. He'll be born in Bethlehem. But do they go? Are they excited? No, they're like cowering. They're giving right answers, but cowering under what might happen because Herod is a mad king and the political system has gone crazy. Then Herod called the Magi secretly, and he found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, and he said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him. Herod sets a trap. Herod sets a trap. And he sends no one with them. Herod says, okay, you go. And Herod doesn't say, okay, and we'll follow and sneak behind you and find out. Remember, he's an excellent politician, and he trusts his ability to get what he wants. He knows how to manipulate. He knows how to connive in ways. He knows how to say one thing to set people up to believe something, even though he's got a totally different intention. Herod acts like he has the same motivation as the Magi, but he doesn't. After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. See, they had seen the star, but it had not given them specific directions. So they went to Jerusalem. I mean, the star must have done something where they said, okay, there's a star, it must mean something. We follow it, and it takes us into Judea. And where would a king be born? A king would be born in Jerusalem. A king would be born to who? Well, a king would be born the son of a king, because that's how it goes. So let's go to Jerusalem. Let's go to Herod. Let's say, hey, where's the king? We're here to pay homage. The king wasn't born in Jerusalem. Not born where they would have thought. And so supernaturally, then the star appears and says, you're close, warmer, warmer, warmer. And it leads them 6 miles south to Bethlehem. It reappears and leads them directly to the spot. Notice the word written is child, not baby. It's inferred and estimated likely that Jesus is between 6 months and 18 months old at this time. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Their response was joy. Are the Magi Jews? They're Gentiles. They're not God's chosen people. They were overjoyed. They were Gentiles who traveled far and they were filled with joy. The religious leaders who had long awaited the Messiah, who was now in their backyard, they were filled with fear. Hear that? The religious leaders who they've been reading and waiting, they're filled with fear. The Gentile Magi are filled with joy. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. They come to a house, not a stable. Custom would be you would always write the older person's name first and then the younger. So even first century Jews reading this would be like, oh wait, why is the child is placed before the mother? Greater importance. They bowed down. They bowed down and they worshiped him. This book, Matthew, is written to Jews. The first account, though, of someone worshiping the Messiah are Gentile astrologers or magicians. See, Jesus has come for those who are far away from God. And this would have been shocking. I mean, had we read this as first century Jews, and this letter was written to us, and we've become believers, we say, oh my word. Because in Luke are the shepherds were Jewish, okay, and in Luke is that, but in Matthew here, he doesn't record any of that. This is the first people coming to Jesus is recorded in the book of Matthew that's written to Jewish people. It's Gentile astrologers. They bowed down. They worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All right, I'm going to show you something. You're going to like this, I think. Because this is maybe where we get the camels. All of these prophecies about the coming Messiah that are written of in the Old Testament. One of them is Isaiah chapter 60, verse 6. All right, buckle up. Herds of camels will cover your land, young camels of Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come, that's from the east, bearing gold and incense and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. So they bring these gifts that were written of ahead of time before, and gold and of incense, and there was a bunch of camels, so maybe camels. And all right, let's talk about the number. We have no clue how many wise men there were. There could have been 62. We know how many gifts they brought. We don't know how many there were. We also, you guys know that song? We three kings of Orient are. Next year, they're going to make a video of me singing Christmas carols to show. It's going to be so good. Bearing gifts, we traveled thus far. Psalm 72, verse 10. May the kings, these are prophecies about the Messiah coming. May the kings of Tarshish and of distant shores bring tributes to him. May the kings of Sheba and Seba present him gifts. May all kings bow down to him and all nations serve him. You see these prophecies and then how it's being fulfilled, and it says kings. So maybe we say, these magi were kings. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but I want to keep reading this because this is powerful. Listen to what it speaks of who Jesus is. For he will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. He will take pity on the weak and the needy and save the needy from death. He will rescue them from oppression and violence, for precious is their blood in his sight. Oh man, it speaks to the heart of God and the purposes of the Messiah coming. It's all right, if you sing We Three Kings and you want to put camels there, we're sort of okay. They bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These gifts are of value, but they're also of symbolism. Gold would be for royalty. He is King of the Jews. He is king. He is royal. Frankincense is a valuable aromatic sap from the boswellia tree. I have no clue what that is. I just read it and then I wrote it down. So they would scratch this tree and the sap would come out, and then how they'd cure it, they would make frankincense. And they still use it, essential oils today. In this time, what it was used for was religious practices, like when you burn, what's that stuff called that you burn? And it's incense. We don't know. You do know. I don't know. Incense. And it was like in religious ceremonies, it would represent divinity. Gold, you are a king. Frankincense, you are divine, you are the Son of God. Myrrh was actually another scraped out of trees and sap, and it was an aromatic, but it was used in burial to embalm. Right from the get-go, they are recognizing you are king, you are divine, you have come to give your life. In your death, you will save many. And these gifts laid down at Jesus' feet represent this. They're also gifts of value. Because right after this happens, God is going to appear to Joseph and warn him of Herod's impending attack, and they're going to flee to Egypt. Likely, they use these gifts to provide what God has called them to do. Friends, in the same way, here pretty soon, we're going to come and we're going to bring our gifts. And we're going to set them in the manger. And then the church is going to use these gifts to be about God's purposes here. In really maybe mundane ways. Hey, we're going to fix up a bathroom, and we're going to put a better road sign, and we're going to fix up and have a much better playground. Not because we're a church that wants a nice playground and sign and restroom. No, God, because we're going to do some of these mundane things to be used for your purposes, God, because we want to champion the next generation. This is a safe and a fun place for young kids. Right? We want men and women to come in and feel comfortable here. We want to be seen along the roadside and just say, hey, let's just do this well. But man, we don't come to it's much deeper than let's raise funds to do something. We're saying, God, we want to bow down. We want to worship. Use our trinket gifts for your big divine purposes. And I want to highlight something. I want to highlight that this narrative of the wise men is only found in the book of Matthew. Matthew, I've already told you, is written to Jewish believers. What I'm about to say, I'd never thought of before until studying for this sermon, but this was very fascinating to me. Where else in Scripture, think Old Testament, okay, Bible geeks, get it going right now. A child is born. A child who will set his people free from oppression. And at his birth, those in power attempt to kill him. In fact, there's genocide. I'm not done yet. He escapes and he goes to a faraway land. He later returns to lead his people to salvation, to freedom. All right, now say it. Moses. I mean, any Jewish believer who's reading this is going to be like, man, so many of them, and I'm not saying that Jesus, Moses was a type of Jesus or something. I'm just saying that any Jewish believer would say, man, embedded in our history is God bringing us from a place of freedom or from a place of slavery to a place of freedom. And that as a child, Moses, is put in the river so that he's not killed. And we see it happening again. And any Jewish believer would recognize this and notice this. As Moses led us out of slavery, Jesus leads us. See, Moses led us out of the slavery of the Egyptians. Jesus leads us out of the slavery to sin and the demands of the Old Testament. We are freed from the religious works of the Old Testament by the work of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. It is through him that we have authentic relationship with God. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. God intervenes with the Gentile magicians, thus saving Jesus from Herod's maddening wrath. Friends, this Christmas season, as we prepare the way within our own souls for the celebration of the birth of Jesus, what can we learn from the narrative of the Wisemen? Okay, I'm going to ask you to sink your teeth into this some. Because I want you to learn Scripture and be fascinated and compelled by the story. I want you to be transformed by the truth of God. So I'm going to ask some questions here and sink our teeth. What can we learn from this narrative? A number of these I got from a guy named David Guzik, who I really enjoy his commentaries and his teaching. There were three responses. Herod displayed an open hostility and hatred. There are those today that display hostility and hatred. The chief priests and the scribes, they were indifferent while retaining their religious respectability. The wise men, they sought out Jesus and they worshiped him even at great cost. Open hatred and hostility, indifference, seeking him out, worshiping him, even at great cost. I mentioned the shepherds. It actually did happen earlier on the night that he was born. But when we compare the shepherds and the wise men, listen to this. Jesus came first to the Jew, the shepherds, then to the Gentile, the wise men. Jesus came first to the humble, then to the honorable. Jesus came first to the poor, then to the rich. And what did these wise men do? They did not just sit and admire the star. They followed it to see where it led. Friends, this is actually a big one. They were able to distinguish between the sign and the substance, the gift and the giver. This has a lot of weight actually in our lives. They persevered in their search. Has anyone sought for a long time, sought the Lord, sought answers, sought God's hand in an area of your life? They persevered in their search. They were not discouraged by wayward religious leaders. Okay? Many of us, have scars from church. Many of our religious leaders, maybe even at one point that we held up high, been smashed down off that pedestal. They were not discouraged by wayward religious leaders. They were not distracted by worry of fear-based political parties. Period. They rejoiced at the star. There was joy. They were marked by joy. And when they arrived at the destination of the star, they entered in. They didn't just stand out and say, oh, it's in there. Wow, isn't that awesome? Let's get out of here. So we'll just leave our gifts on the doorstep. They might be sleeping. God, may we be a people who, when we arrive at the destination that you call us to, that we enter in to what you have for us. And when they entered in, they bowed down and they worshiped immediately. Immediately. And when they worshiped, they did not come empty-handed. They adorned him with their gifts. God, we come down and we respond to the truth of who you are, and we still have questions and doubts, and we're not sure, and we're taking steps of faith, and we're growing. But God, when we enter in and we see we're going to bow down and worship you, and we're not coming empty-handed, because you are of value. Charles Spurgeon said this in one of his great sermons. Those who look for Jesus will see him. Those who truly see him will worship him. Those who worship him will consecrate their substance to him. Those who worship him and who truly worship him will consecrate their substance to him. Our stuff, God, here's money and gifts, and we give this to you as a recognition and as worship, but even the substance much deeper, God. May they reflect our lives. We continue to consecrate. You be our vision. You direct us. We come before you and we bow down and we worship. So we're going to do this now, church. The band is going to sing. They're going to sing a verse, and we're just going to sit here.